Welcome to the Fret Friends Podcast, a guitar and music podcast here to instruct, inform, and showcase. Fret Friends is a podcast from AP Guitar, a music tuition business established in 2012, which provide lessons, workshops, and courses to students all over the world. So here's your host, Adam Picard.
Yes, hello everybody. I really hope that you are well. Thank you for listening again. I just had some stats in after the first 4 episodes, and there are quite a few of you listening now in many, many countries, which makes me feel extremely happy. And I hope that these episodes are helping you. Please remember to leave a review and rate if you are enjoying it, so that others can enjoy as well. Thank you so much, honestly. So today, season 1, episode 6, the power of ear training. This is going to be one of my mini segments within the podcast. It will pop up throughout the various seasons. And today's part of that is how to tell the difference between a major and minor chord. First of all, a little bit of AP guitar news. I have a couple of lesson slots available. So if you want to take your guitar learning journey to the next level, then please drop me an email on contact@apguitar.co.uk, or you can send me a text through the send us a text button in the show notes, and I'll get back to you immediately and we'll have a chat, see if it's the right thing for you. As musicians, one of the very first things we should try to do, ear training wise, should be to start learning the differences between the sounds of major and minor chords. It will help define everything. There are a few concepts that can really help you distinguish between them. This is how I would explain this to a 7-year-old or a 777-year-old. That major chords sound happy. Minor chords sound sad. The major chord is made up of the root note, the major third note, and the perfect fifth note. Now, that may sound like it's in a completely different language to you. What that means is, if you run through the major scale, you take the first note, you take the third note, 2, nope, 3, yes, 4, no, 5, yes, 1, 3, 5. So you run through the major scale in order, and you take the first note, the third note, and the fifth note. You play them together, and that creates your chords. Now, as you could see on a guitar, I am playing more than 3 notes there. What I'm doing is doubling up on those notes as well. As we have 6 strings on this instrument, it helps to make the most of it. In the open chord position, that is a G major chord. I've taken the first note, 2, no, 3, yes, 4, no, 5, yes, and play them together. That's the chord formula for a major chord. 1, 3, 5. Minor chord, very similar. You take the first note, 2, no, 3, no. We take the flattened third. To flatten a note, we go down a semitone. To sharpen a note, for your info, we go up a semitone. So we take the third note of the scale and we flatten it. What was a B now becomes what we call a B flat. The third note is a fifth. You go back into the scale and you go through the fourth, nope, and you go to the fifth, yes. So we have 1, flat 3, and perfect fifth again. The fourth notes and the fifth notes of the major scale we call perfect. G minor. Hopefully you can hear that. Minor chords sound sad. they sound a little lower. If they do, that is because we are genuinely lowering one of the notes. They sound a little darker as well. Major chords sound a bit brighter. Major, minor. That was G major and G minor. So that's how we apply it as well. You run through the major scale and then you take the notes. This is how we build chords. Think of them as building blocks. At some point in another one of these, the Power of Ear training segments, we'll look at different types of chords and the chord formulas for those as well. Not always do we have 3 notes in a chord. Sometimes we have 4-note chords, like major 7th chords, dominant 7 chords, etc. Anyway, let's come back to the major and minor. Lots of nursery rhymes use the major scale. So in the Western world, we are instilled with this sound. It's almost like our default scale, or as I always think of it, is the soundtrack to early years. Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, for example, all built up from the major scale. Whereas the Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel is a great example of a song in a minor key. Lots of minor chords going on there. The clue is in the title, and also if you know the song, it sounds quite sad. Okay. That's me running through the scale again. There are 8 notes in the scale, but there are only 7 different notes in the scale. The first note and the 8th note are exactly the same, and we say that they are 1 octave apart from each other. We're going to go into this in a lot more detail in another episode. But for now, say we are in the key of G major, running through this. Each one of those notes, you can apply a certain chord type to as well. This is how chords work together. Call it the diatonic scale. The first chord in the key of G major is always G. The 4th is major. So major for the 1st, major for the 4th, major for the 5th. The 2nd, the 3rd, and the 6th are minor. Now, you can come out of this, of course, otherwise every song will sound very, very similar. But if we do, then we're either changing key or we are borrowing a chord from another key, going slightly modal perhaps. But in general, first is major, the second chord is minor, the third chord is minor, the 4th is major, the 5th is major, the 6th is minor, the 7th is diminished, but that rarely comes up in rock and pop music. And then the 8th is major, as the 8th note of the scale is the same as the first note. Really, all I need you to take from this at the moment is, as I say in the title, the difference between major chords and minor chords. It's over to you now. I am going to play you a set of chords. Now, all of the chords in the set will either be major or they will be minor. And I would like you to have a guess on your own, at home, in your car, on the way to work, at work, potentially, as to whether they are major chords or minor chords. Okay, if you are ready, let's go. Are these chords major chords or are they minor chords? If you're unsure, ask yourself this: do they sound happy or do they sound sad? I do understand it's very difficult because you may think, oh, they sound one way or they sound the other way. And then until you hear the other chord, it puts it all into perspective and it grounds you and you go, oh no, they weren't. If you guessed minor, then you were correct. Let me show my working now. We're at school. A minor, E minor. I believe I then played D minor and then A minor again. For your info, if I played those same chords, but as major chords, so instead of A minor, E minor, D minor, A minor, if I played them as major chords, A major, E major, D major, A major. Hopefully you can hear the difference. If not, this is a little and often thing to practice. There are some apps that you can use to help as well. And over time, it becomes easier. Think of this, right? In the future, you'll be able to hear a set of chords, or even just one chord. You'll be able to say, that's a minor chord. That's a major chord. How useful is that? And it just makes you sound so good as well. Makes you sound like you really, really know what you're talking about. You can also have inversions of these chords. Now, this is where you play the same three notes, so the first, the third, and the fifth. But instead of the first note, which we call the root note, being the first note that you hit when you play the chord, you would actually start the chord with either the third note of the scale or the fifth note of the scale. These are called inversions. This is me playing an inversion of G major. I started with the third note of the scale, but it still had the first note of the scale within the chord, and it still had the fifth note of the scale within the chord. It just changes the overall feel very slightly. It's playing around with voicings as well. We don't want every chord to always start with the root note. You can play an inversion. Bass players play inversions as well. They're not playing chords, but if the guitar is playing a G major chord with the correct or formal root note, the bass player might be playing on the third or the fifth. Again, just to make it sound more interesting and more harmonic. Where was I? Right, so the first inversion of a chord, so the correct title would be G major in the first inversion, or first inversion of G major, would be to start with the third note of the scale. The second inversion of G major, or G major in the second inversion, is to start from the fifth note of the scale. Like this. The note of D, which is the fifth, is acting as the root note. I've also got a G in there, a B, and another G, because I'm playing 4 strings, so I can't only play 3 notes. So to recap that, the first inversion of G is when you start from the third note of the scale. The second inversion of G is when you start the chord from the fifth note of the scale. Right. I think we're at the point now of making some key takeaways from this episode. Yes, I think we are. Major chords sound happy. Minor chords sound sad. And I think what we'll do is we'll do one more test. Okay, so are the chords that I'm about to play, are they major chords or are they minor chords? Here we go. If you're unsure, do they sound happy or sad to you? Okay, I'm assuming that you've made up your mind by now. If you said major, Unfortunately, you were incorrect because they were minor chords again. That's right. I gave you 2 tests and I did the same answer both times. Go me. Right, so they were minor chords. And again, actually, I can't remember which chords I played. I think it was the same 3 as earlier, but I probably put them in a different order. Right. I think that brings us to the end. Thank you so much again. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. Season 1, episode 6, The Power of Ear Training, how to tell the difference between a major chord and a minor chord. Stick around, subscribe to this podcast because I'm going to add in other types of chords as well. By the end of it, you will be able to tell the difference between many different chord types, which is extremely useful, as I hope that you can imagine. Thank you for listening. My website, if you want to inquire about lessons, workshops, or courses, is apguitar.co.uk. My email is contact@apguitar.co.uk. Please get in touch. We can have a chat and get you signed up. Please subscribe, leave a rating, review. That helps to grow the podcast, I hear, which would be very great. Thank you so much in advance if you can. My Instagram and TikTok are both at AP Guitar Guru, and my YouTube is at AP Guitar TV. Yeah. Thank you very much. It is extremely cold here right now, so I'm going to go put the heating back on. I hope that you are all well. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all at the next one.